Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. I think most of you are on the other side of the world for me. It is 10 a.m. in the morning here in central Illinois. My name is Mike Gizzi, and I'm really excited to be with you today. As I said, it's been a little bit crazy week. I appreciate your cooperation in having me move this back an hour, but truly appreciate that. So, I am a political scientist by training, a professor of criminal justice. I teach at Illinois State University in Normal, Illinois, which is about 2.5 hours south of the windy city of Chicago. And school starts in a couple weeks. I'm a certified trainer with MAXQDA. I do weekly webinars. I've got consultations, and so on. I present it at MQIC, etc. I've been using MAXQDA now for about 5 or 6 years, and my most recent work is a edited book with Stefan Rodecker, The Practice of Qualitative Data Analysis, Research Examples Using MAXQDA, free to you from MAXQDA Press. Tony is one of our authors. QUAL is one of our authors, contributors on it. Whenever you have questions, you can reach me. I do my consulting work using my Gmail, mgizzi, mgizzi @gmail.com. And if you want it, I don't use it a lot, but it's on my phone. I have WhatsApp, and that number is right there on the slide. I will, if anyone has joined in late, there's a link to the PDF that I'll be using. The PowerPoint will be both in PowerPoint and then most of our time in MAXQDA. So I'm really excited about today. There's the handout. Today is our first in a series, Train the Trainer webinars, and the focus is on document summaries. Which is an interesting title when you think about it, document summaries, because there's actually no tool called document summaries in MAXQDA. And we'll talk about that. My goal is to demonstrate how I train people to use document summaries. I actually use the same materials that I used last week in the webinar on document summaries. But also for us to have time to discuss best practices and how we train it, how we use these tools and such. I'm hoping this is more interactive than your traditional webinar, which is one of the reasons why
Hi.
I chose to use Zoom.
Shikira, ik ben gerade im Webinar. Ich schick's dir gleich, gell?
I don't think she meant that. So I'll use the same basic tools that I use in my webinars, but I'll try to make it as much more interactive as possible. Yes, that's awesome. Google asked that if you're interested in more trainer webinars, write in the comments what topics, tools you'd like to see. So we'll get started. So document summaries. When we're talking about document summaries, we're really, the two primary tools that we're looking at, of course, are the summary grid and the summary table, which enables you to identify coded segments and write brief summaries that you present in tabular form. You don't have to create a table. You can use the Summary Explorer. You can use MAXMaps with your summaries, but in general, I sort of view this as the bulk of this tool is about using the summary grid and then creating a table from it. Are document summaries something you normally include in your trainings? Is this something that you tend to focus on, or is this something that you don't? I'm just curious.
For me, it really depends on what is needed.
Yeah. I'd never start with it, but it is sort of I have an approach, sort of when I'm training people, we kind of walk through an analysis process, and it's about 6 or 7 steps in, but it's often a very valuable tool. And in fact, for me, it's one of my favorite tools in MAXQDA. I think it's really powerful. So that's good. And well, I'm glad that there's not a lot of usage from you in this from the standpoint, so that some of this might actually be valuable. So for me, whenever I do a webinar series, I always, when we get to the analysis section, I always include it as a week of it. So that's important as well. So the first thing that I deal with document summaries is trying to help people understand what they are. It's really important to be able to explain to users, or the trainees, if you will, what a document summary is and how they differ from the other writing tools and summary tools in MAXQDA. And so I explain them in the context of the 4 tools MAXQDA provides for writing: paraphrases, memos, coding comments, and document summaries. And so I'm going to show you how I do that, and it's actually with a series of 3 slides. And this is an actual slide from a webinar. So when I'm training people, I talk about it from the standpoint of, let's think of MAXQDA as a writing toolbox. A toolbox that has 4 components. Memos, which you use to write important analytical thoughts, take notes, raise questions. And I talk about the fact that they're searchable, talk about the fact that you can attach them to pretty much everything in MAXQDA. And they have no limits on length. Or if they do have a limit on length, it's I've never encountered it. I contrast that with coding comments, which are brief tweet length, 255 character annotations to a coded segment, which I use to identify key segments. I view in the retrieved segments, view in the sidebar, actually view in the summary grid as well. And then I come to the 2 key elements for this: the differences between paraphrases and summary tables. And so when I'm thinking about paraphrases, we're talking about summarizing text which we do not need to code. And I describe them in the context of literature reviews and in the process of exploring your data for inductive code building. And so paraphrasing is before we've coded. Summary tables, we use document summaries. We write brief summaries of coded text. And then I continue on by talking about, encouraging people to think big, thinking about that writing throughout the process of a research project. You might think of MAXQDA just as the tool to do a content analysis, but it's really all-encompassing. Summarizing materials from articles in a literature review, using paraphrases, taking notes while you read encoded document, memos, annotating coded segments, writing up research results in free memos, building an annotated code book with a code memo. And then I further discuss the key differences, that memos are searchable, the other tools are not. And mostly here I'm not focused on summary tables yet. The specific uses of paraphrases and code comments. And then I get to the distinctions between paraphrasing and document summaries. So I think it's really important to be able to distinguish between paraphrased text and summary and summaries created through the summary grid. They both engage in taking words and putting them into your own, taking text and putting them into your own words, summarizing them. But paraphrasing is something we tend to do early in a project. It's something we tend to do before we've coded or for a specific task. Anthony talks through us in the chapter in his book about ways of, literature reviews. Document summaries are only possible after you have coded data. If you don't have coded data, you cannot create a document summary. They let you summarize, they let you synthesize, they let you refine coded segments, they let you view them in a table or in a MAXMap. There's a few other ways as well that we'll get to. And so I think of it like this. On the left, we have paraphrasing done before coding. We code our data. We add coding comments. We create document summaries of coded segments when it's appropriate or when we want to. Memos we write throughout the whole process. I think that that's a way that's useful for people in thinking this through. Any questions? Is it all good? Okay, cool. So, as I said, we paraphrase documents we want to summarize before we develop the coding system. The document summary lets us take coded segments and summarize them using the summary grid, because that's the first tool, and then create a really kind of powerful table with the summary table to view the summaries together. So the first element is realizing here that when we're talking about document summaries, there are two primary tools. We have to use the summary grid first, and that's what we'll do today, is we'll focus on the summary grid first. And then we'll create a table to display your summaries. When should you summarize coded segments? Well, I was thinking about this the other day, and it seemed to me that these sort of questions sort of lead you to, times when it may make a lot of sense. Are there substantive differences in coded segments that would benefit from refining the information into summaries? So I'm going to show you some research projects done, a couple done by students, and they were involving wrongful convictions. And people who were wrongfully convicted of crimes and ultimately exonerated, set free. And we were looking at police misconduct. And so a code would be used like violence, or the threat of violence was used against this suspect. But that's broad enough that there may be a lot of differences in it. And so taking the coded segments and then refining them or summarizing them into document summaries actually became a key part of the research project. Are you coding segments longer than a few words? Do they tend to be paragraph length? Are they longer than paragraph length? In which case, there may be a lot of different ideas in there, and a document summary becomes a very valuable tool to refine. Think about thematic analysis, where you've got 4 or 5 broad themes, and you're coding, multiple paragraphs in that same theme. You may want to refine that. Are there multiple segments with the same codes in a case or document? Again, in which case you may benefit from refining segments into a summary. You don't need to summarize, though, if your coded segments tend to be just a couple of words long, mostly. It's probably pretty unlikely that you're going to want to do that. It depends a lot on the coding system you develop. It depends on the approach you take. I'm going to show you an example later where my student used an incredibly creative way of refining his data with summary tables. Yet he did it in a way which he probably could have accomplished just by using the smart coding tool to add additional codes, refining the data. And I'll show you that later. There's also a couple different approaches to summary to summarization. When I think about document summaries, I'm generally thinking about taking a paragraph or a paragraph length segment and refining it, reducing it to to the main points. But you can use it in a different direction. And she's not with us right now. Technology has failed today. But QUAL, in her dissertation, which is in chapter 8 of our book, she uses document summaries to aggregate her thematic summaries into what she calls meta summaries. And so she takes individual segments, summaries that she wrote, and then actually adds even broader, bigger kind of overall summaries. I encourage you to grab a copy of the book and take a look at that. It's not the approach I'll be using today, but it's described she describes it really well in the text. So meta summaries can be used to create sort of a larger, big picture summary of individual cases. And she describes that by creating an empty document, which she then includes in the summary table. And in a summary table, you can add text to any cell of the table. And so she sort of uses it that way. And I'll show you that basic idea in a little bit. So before we jump into the actual use of the summary grid, first off, where do we find summary tools? It's interesting. MAXQDA does not keep document summaries in one place. In the analysis, and in fact, you will find elements involving document summaries in 4 different menus. The analysis menu, mixed methods menu, visual tools menu under MAXMaps, and there's a typo there, reports menu. So in the analysis menu, we have the 3 main tools: the summary grid, the summary table, the summary explorer. This just lets you see document by document the summaries you've created for a code. This creates a table. And we'll show examples of that. We also have summary tools available under mixed methods, under side-by-side display of results using summaries, and qualitative themes by quantitative groups using summaries. And so that's the second area. I've been really pushing Stefan to ask the MAXQDA folks at Verbi to add to us a tool, a favorites bar, so I can take my favorite 10 tools and lump them all together. That would be really helpful. In addition, we have visual tools. MAXMaps lets you create document models, single case models for summaries, and single code models for summaries. So I'll show you examples of both of those later. And then finally, you can also view your summaries in the reports menu. I gotta be honest, it's a menu I rarely use, but I didn't even realize it was there. But you can get an overview of all the summaries here, and you can actually, and then as well here, and they're slightly different. I'll show you the differences of those. So I'll use 2 more slides and then we'll jump in live. Whenever you have questions, please just put them into the chat, or if it's appropriate, and we can have a conversation. So when you go to analysis and the summary grid, you're going to get something that looks like this. Although this, to be honest, this particular example is I've already reduced the data to particular codes and documents. And so the summary grid is an interesting tool. It's a grid, it's a matrix of documents and codes with little blue dots and with green backgrounds sometimes. We have coded segments here, and we have the summaries that you write here. Each cell with a blue dot has a coded segment. So in that particular project, the parent code, police misconduct, was coded by the student. And so therefore there is a blue dot there that you could write you could easily write a summary for if you wanted. Then there are a series of subcodes. And the task in this project was trying to understand police misconduct. And so the student's task was to write a summary of each of the cells of the subcodes that had a blue dot. There are a series of icons across the top. Thankfully, as always in MAXQDA, you can hover over them to see what they mean when it works. Sometimes I swear you're trying to do it, you're training, and then it just won't work. Do you want to limit it to just activated documents? Do you want to limit it just to activated codes? You have the 3 views of the document display width. You can make it smaller, medium, or large. We have the all-important square versus circle choice. I always leave it alone. I don't really care, but some people want circles. We can show the source. And if there's a gray background, it means that's on. We can show comments. We can show memos. So this is the link to where the actual segment is. Code, comments, memos. We can standardize the text size. And we can jump directly into the summary table. It's a really easy tool to teach. Look at the table where you see a blue dot and the background is in green. Read the cell, write out your summary. You'll see there's a green cell there in that particular example. For some crazy reason, I must have added a summary or some text to that one, and I didn't catch it yesterday when I was finishing this. So, enough with PowerPoint. Let's go to MAXQDA. Here's our project, our historical exoneration project. Here's our coding system. Again, all done by an undergraduate, now a graduate student. And we're going to be particularly interested in this, but I'm just going to start by going to Analysis and Summary Grid. See it in its default format. And what we have here are all of the codes in the project, and we can scroll. We can scroll through the cells to see where the summaries are. So I'm going to go to Violence. And here's the first one. I want to make sure this is on and this is on. Notice here are 2 coded segments within the document on violence or the threat of violence. Here is the link to where it is. So if there's a segment, there's a coded segment that's not clear to you, you can easily click on it and go right to it. Just drag it out of your way. Okay. Here is a code comment that was added to this second segment. And this was really, it wasn't a real one, but I wanted there to be a memo. There's a selection memo that was added for it. You just have to click on it and it will bring it out for you. So you can see the memo that was written. This cell has already been summarized, but let's, through the magic of the computer, pretend it hasn't. I click on this. I read these. I decide how I want to summarize them. I write my summary magically. And now the cell is green. That's it. Oh, if I want to standardize the cell, I can the text so that they're always going to be the same. I can do that. I don't usually have to. I can also make the text larger so it's easy to read for me. I can maximize this if I want. Same with anything in MAXQDA. But I want to... what's next? But sometimes, actually, usually when I'm working on a project with summaries, I don't tend to want to see every code in the project. And so I will tend to focus it by activating the codes that I'm interested in summarizing. And so that would give me all of the documents just for those codes. But I also tend to want to even make it easier. So I could, since this project actually did result in coding police misconduct, I could activate documents containing the code, or I could go to mixed methods, activate documents by variable. I had already created a police misconduct variable. Because it could show up multiple times and the choices were, oh, crap, dang it. I guess we have to do it. Police misconduct. There's potential 4 uses of it in that. So I'm just going to set it to not equal to 0. That gives me the 59 documents I want. I can activate those documents. I could also create a set of those and just activate the set. So now I've got the 59 cases and I've got police misconduct. I go to the summary grid. And now I have every document involves police misconduct, and every document is going to have at least one blue dot in the subcodes. And so, as you see in this version here, everyone has been, well, most of them have been coded. So once again, I would read it and I'm making this up because my brain isn't working well enough. It won't spell check for you. And then add to it however I want. And now it's blue. Again, maybe you want circles, you can have your circles. You can make it big if you need to know the names. I usually just leave it like that because in this particular project, it's not important to me who it is. I just want to make sure I have finished that task. If I want to see all of the codes, just go back to there. I can turn them on and off. So pretty simple, pretty standard MAXQDA stuff, right? Everybody good with the summary grid? It is an easy tool to teach. It's not hard. I think really the key elements to it for me are making sure people understand how they can narrow it down to the documents they want, and then just making sure they realize that for the tool to work, you want to have summarized, the cells which have coded segments. You don't have to necessarily, how you write the summary is going to be entirely up to the user, the researcher. What is the key points? That's where your own intellectual process is going to come into play. So that's the summary grid. Summary grid, black dot. So as I've included here, explaining the fact that this is all there, using activations. That gets us to the summary table. Again, we can't create we could create a table, but it'll be completely empty. A summary table is created once you've completed at least a grid for at least one cell. It has a lot to it. We'll go over the icons here, and then we'll go live as well. And there's a lot more flexibility with the summary table, so we'll spend a lot more time on that. So here are your icons. Only activated codes. This is where you create a new summary table. In the summary table tool, it's sort of like MAXMaps, where when you add a map, it's just another map into the same thing. This is the same concept. As many maps as tables as you want. Display the variable names in the first column. I'll show you that. Selecting columns to display in the table. Swapping rows and columns, which is cool. It's like a pivot table in Excel. Oops, I hate that. Inserting your table as a table document. And so the table that you create does not have to just exist in the summary table tool. You can move it to make it a document itself, which you then, of course, could code. Then there's this thing here, create a new code. I put code in quotation marks because it actually does create a new code, but it's kind of limited, and it's really meant to be a column in the table where you can add additional text information. But what's confusing about it is when you add that information, it doesn't actually create a coded segment. So I will explain that, and I will actually show you a workaround that I sort of discovered. The zoom tools here to make the text larger or smaller. And then on the right-hand side, we have the export tools on the right. Wow. My proofreading is bad. Clipboard, send it to the clipboard, to Word, Excel, export to a file. So those are your options there. So when you access the summary table, we'll start simple. You create a summary table by selecting the codes. You have two elements here. Choose documents and codes, choose variables. We're just going to do this live instead of PowerPoint. Boring. So I can access it from here, or I can access it from here, exactly the same, doesn't matter. You'll notice there's a whole bunch of tables already been created, but we will just go create new summary table. And only for activated documents or all documents. Remember, I had already activated documents, right? So I limited it to cases. So where there was police misconduct, if I were to select withhold evidence and just click OK, this is what I'm going to get. A table that's going to show me every document that involved police misconduct. And then in the right, it's going to provide the summaries for that code withhold evidence. Now, if I want that to be more specific and eliminate these columns, these rows, what would I do? I would most likely just activate only documents that include that code. So I'm going to reset my activations. This was withholding evidence, right? And I got too much on the screen, so close the grid. Move that over here. I'm going to activate documents containing this code. Now I'm going to create now we're up to summary table 7, right? I've been creating too many of them yesterday. Yesterday was a packing day, loading a big truck on a day where we're in the Fahrenheit system where it was about 90 degrees out, so it was like over 30, I think. It was miserable. It was a brutal day. Delete a few of those. So click here, summary table, withhold evidence, only for activated documents. So I do have, and in this project there were a couple duplicate documents and those got removed. So there are a few errors there where there was something wasn't, no text was added, but you basically here have everything that was, every cell. I can sort it so I can see them this way. I can sort by names. Pretty straightforward, but that's sort of just the start. So let's create another one. Oh, actually, let's reset activations. Go back here, and I'm just going to stick with police misconduct. I want to activate those. It's one of the things you constantly, when I'm consulting with people, it's constantly a thing. Well, wait, before you do something, make sure you're looking at the documents that you want to look at. It's way too easy, particularly if you're like transforming variables and stuff. So I want to create a summary table, but this time I want to include several codes. I'll include all the policemen. I'll just do a few of them. Only for activated documents. And then that's going to give me a table that looks like this. This is already really interesting. Think about this. You're writing a paper. Now all of a sudden you've got this table here. You want to understand police misconduct. Here are all your cases. And you can see when there are multiple, actually, why are none of those, come on. All right, examples where you have multiple things that were going on in the case. It's a really interesting way of creating a summary. Let's do it again, though. Let's add some more. This time, let's switch over here to choose variables. Now, in this project, we do have some document variables. This wants to know here variables for the first column, which is right here. So maybe I want to include the age of the individual and their race and gender. He wrote sex. Here, maybe I want to know also what they were sentenced to, the year they were convicted, and the year they were exonerated, creating their own columns. Actually, I'll just stick with the first column first so you can see it. So now I've got some codes I've selected, some variables I've selected. I'm limiting it to the activated documents. I select, and I'm going to include all of these. I'm going to select OK. Now you'll notice we have a table. It's a much more complete table of the research that was done, right? But over here, we now have demographic information about each individual, exoneree. Make sense? If we go further, notice within the same session, anything you already have will stay in here. I go to variables and I say I want a year. I'm just going to add this year they were convicted and the year they were exonerated. Now this variable data will show up in a column by itself. I click OK. Now my table looks a little bit different. Okay. Hang on a second. I want to give myself a little more space. The first thing you'll notice is the variable information gets put in first. There is no way in MAXQDA to tell it to go after the summaries. However, all I have to do is drag it. I made a table with way too much data. And I could drag it to the end if I wanted to. I also can say, all right, I want to sort data by violence or the threat of violence in this table. I click on it. All of the violence cases will show up first. All the other data will be there tied to that person, but it's going to sort it based on that. One second. Turn off that notification. If I don't like that, I can right click and reset the sorting. I also can right click and say I don't really need this and hide that column. How do I get it back? Go to select columns. Now I could bring it back. It won't let me rearrange, but it will let me, actually it'll do it alphabetically, but lets me deselect, select the things, turn them on or off. Recreate the table. I can do more. I can edit the summary in the table if I want. Now I can't do much with it. I can't boldface or anything, but I can add additional text to it. So I might be looking at things and I might see that I had created summaries and I want to make little tweaks to it. Entirely possible. Oh, or you add them from your data or wherever. Yeah. First, you need to convert codes or documents. You're right. I'm sorry I missed that earlier on in the chat. But yes, if there's no document variable, you have to have created it first. So you have to go through that process of creating the document variable from your data or whatever. But that's a different topic, I guess. So we've got a fairly complex table here. I want to create a simpler one. I'm going to get rid of, that can stay, but I'm going to get rid of these. And I'm going to narrow this down. Violence. Just keep a fairly simple table with the data here. Then we have this thing here. Create a new code. And in fact, I'm going to do this. Make sure you can see the code system. I click on it. And I click Add New Code, and it pops up there. You'll notice it's different than the normal Add New Code if I had accessed that anywhere else. What's missing? Come on, it's quiz, right? It's missing the color options. It's missing the memo. Okay. You can add those later, but we'll add a new code, and we're just going to call this sample call. I already created one called notes, but I guess I'll create a note field. Watch what happens when I click this. I now have a column here for notes, and you'll notice I have one here as well. I'm going to get rid of that. I forgot to delete that from the last webinar. Let's see. I don't know if this will happen. I'm going to change that to notes. Will it change that? Nope. Notice the code that gets created, I changed it here, but this remains from what I created. Okay. So I'm looking at this table and I'm adding additional information to I've now added something to the table. However, wow. I got to be honest. This is new. This has changed. It's not supposed to. Usually it does not add anything to it. Wow. Create a new code. Interesting. Oh, it's there. Do you ever have a moment when you're training someone and what you think what MAXQDA does or doesn't do is all of a sudden changed? They must have added this into the last release. So I'm wrong. These codes actually do get coded. Impressive. The notes get coded tied to. However, though, I'm not noticing anything when I look at this. So we've got this summary here, notes 2. And yes, you could add, once you get to here, you could add the color to it if you wanted to, and the code memo. Let's look at this. So notes 2, are we going to see this? It's not a comment. I would need to look at it from the standpoint of a summary table. Summary grid. Now that's interesting. So that does not transfer. So these are, there's still some funky stuff with it. It's disturbing though when I learn something. I'm going to get to the workaround. I want to show you a different project. Hang on a second. Let's see where I am in the slides. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh, I want to point out something that sometimes happens. When I created new code, it's popping up on top. There have been many times when I've done this, when I click new code and I see absolutely nothing. And so I click it over and over again. And where is it? It's hiding underneath. Now, maybe they fixed this so this is not happening anymore. But I've had this happen recently as well. It's one of those things you need to be really clear with people about. That if it's not doing it, and then what will end up happening is this. I'll end up with this. I'll end up with like 3 or 4 of these in the background because I kept clicking it and I wasn't seeing it. So let me show you a different project. It's actually related and it's done by the same student who's now a graduate student of mine. Exoneration compensation. He got interested in wanting to understand in the United States what each state provides to an individual who has been exonerated from a crime. Is there financial compensation? What sort of benefits are there? And so he looked at the statutes that existed in 39 states, and he did a content analysis based on the kind of issues he was looking for. And one of the things that he had coded was what he called other benefits. So for example, he coded things that in addition to providing money, what other things did they provide to exonerees? So he created a summary grid and he was looking at this concept, other benefits. And so he took, and to be honest, he's a really sharp student, but if you teach him one tool, he'll use that tool. And he knew how to use summary grids. He wasn't thinking, if I had this coded segment and I wanted to reduce this down to multiple pieces of information, I'd use the smart coding tool and add in new codes for child support payments, attorney's fees, and so on. But he didn't do that. He initially wrote long summaries, and then he did this. He took the original summary and added new codes for all of these elements, creating what actually is a useful table, a table that he'll present. The problem with it, though, was that data by itself was not going to, it wasn't coded in terms of that. How are we going to know what states provided reasonable attorney's fees, for example? So about 2 weeks ago, actually, I was sitting down playing with this, and I got creative. So we have this other benefits table. He created one on compensation, one on eligibility, filing a claim. So these are all normal summary tables. It's pretty good work, right? I told you before that MAXQDA allows you to take a table and create a summary table document. I click on that and get rid of this. It's there 3 times now. Now we have a table here. It's a table document. We could code this document if we wanted to. It feels like a rabbit's hole. Like we're going, are we ever going to end? We code this and then we code it again and we code it again. I was thinking about this from the standpoint, this is basically like spreadsheet data. And so I said, why don't we export this document to a spreadsheet. I think it's already there, so I'm going to call it 1. Save the spreadsheet. Now all the data is there. Now notice each state name has statute/California because it was in a document group. So I did a find and replace on statute/ and replaced all of that. And I realized I didn't want numbers. I wanted to change documents and variables state. And then I wanted the table to look like this. State, other benefits, tuition. So this was the original data. And then here's the new data. Tuition, child support, attorney fees for compensation, etc. Take that file. And I did this actually in a separate project file, although you could have added to it. Notice it wouldn't let me create a new project because I still have one of these stinking new codes hanging around. A bunch of them. I can create a new project. Yeah, I know. Saving it in Dropbox, that's terrible. Import documents from a spreadsheet. I'm going to take other benefits because I've already done that, cleaned it up. I'm going to actually have all of these as codes, and I don't really need to create variables, but so I'll turn them off. I could create a new document group. That's fine. State. Click OK. I don't want to code empty cells. And now look at everything that I have coded automatically. So I know that tuition, 14 states provided tuition benefits. Just like that. Now, again, would the smart coding tool have been a better approach? Maybe. But this wasn't hard. And so what do I call it? The final one that I did, sample from table. I've got this down to a really interesting set of information that he has. And in fact, because these are like survey codes, it's already coded. That makes sense? I still think the smart coding tool might make more sense. However, when I'm looking at, and I could add that data into the original file if I wanted to, because he's got all sorts of stuff in there. He's got literature in there, but he's got a lot of really useful data here that he created in a summary grid, a table. It's quite valuable. It's going to be something that he will certainly use in his project. Yeah, exactly. It's a different means to get to the same goal, and it only took me about 2 or 3 minutes to accomplish it. And all of that data that he had cleaned up, I was then able to easily have as coded data with those new codes. So there's a lot you can do with this. You just have to, get creative. I'm still trying to figure out this fact that it's now coding the data in these new code variables. That's new. I don't know enough to see if that's going to capture everything for me. But I think it might. I really do think it might make this tool even more powerful. But believe me, up until a few weeks ago, it did not code that new segment. So whenever the last release was, I guess I didn't look at the release notes. So, questions. I'll go back to PowerPoint for a bit, see where we are. So I got to correct that info here. So that was the process I used. So we went from this to, to that. So what else do we have when it comes to using document summaries? First off, in MAXQDA, right next to the summary table is the Summary Explorer. And the Summary Explorer just simply allows you to select documents and codes, and it will show you something that looks like this. Here are the codes I selected, same project, and then for these documents, it'll show you what summaries you wrote. So it's a useful tool, particularly I think if you were creating long theme summaries of it. So I would simply go let's see. Let's actually activate some documents so I select the ones that I know have. Wrong file, sorry. I go to Analysis, Summary Explorer. I could actually, I could take them all if I wanted to, but I'll just take 3 or 4. I only activated because I knew that these were police misconduct cases. And then I'm going to take the codes. I'll take them all. Activate, insert activated codes. Click OK. Now I can see for these documents which of these, where the summaries were. Fairly straightforward. To be honest, I don't use this tool, but it's there. I could see when I would. I'm consulting with a PhD student, and with her thematic analysis, I'm pretty sure we'll be using it. But it's not something I personally use. But I wanted you to see all the tools that are involved here. Fairly straightforward. I'm sorry, that's okay. Have a great evening. We'll probably be done in about 20 minutes. And the rain ended here, by the way, which was good. Activate by variable. Let's cancel that. So what else do we have? In mixed methods, we have qualitative themes by quantitative groups, which enables us to view summaries based on document variables. And so you select a document variable and up to 4 values, and then select, it actually says themes instead of codes. But the assumption is it's selecting codes which are actually themes. So it's going to look like this. This is from a different project. So I have a thing that I'd coded, a summarized rationale for not applying Carpenter. The group was crime groups. I selected 4 of the values, and it shows you the numbers of cases. And when I click on that, I then see all of the summaries that I wrote for each of those groups. So this is fairly simple. I will go to this project. I tend to train with multiple projects routinely because not every project has the data that I want. So I want to go to mixed methods, qualitative themes by quantitative groups, summaries, choose the document variable. I think I said crime groups, choose the value that I want. Drag, I want to drag ones that I know have been summarized, and in this project there's not a lot, but this one piece has been. Click OK, and now it's going to show me for those 4 categories the summaries that were written. Now, right here, you can display the origin. That's useful so that I can quickly jump to the case. Aha! No! You ever have that happen in a training? So that's that tool. What data do you let your trainees train? In the last year, I've been living in a world where I've been basically doing a ton of webinars, and with actual one-on-one training, we actually kind of will be using. I haven't been doing group virtual workshops yet. That's coming up hopefully this fall. But I've been doing it where we actually will create a sample, hopefully their own data, but we create a new copy of it. Did MAXQDA load? Yeah, okay. So that table showed us the summaries written for documents that match each group. Hopefully when you click on the location, the origin, that it won't actually kill the data, the project. MAXMaps has 2 options to incorporate summaries into maps. Single case model and single code model. And so basically, in like any other map, you take a single document and drag it in to the map, or a single code. And here's a single case model. So here's one of the exonerees. There was mishandling witnesses and withholding evidence. And then these are the summaries that were written for the 2. Like any other map, you can drag things around. That's okay. I'm glad this was helpful. And then here is the single code model. I like this one. Mishandling of witnesses. And it has for me each of the cases where the summaries that were written for a mishandling of witnesses. Now, visual, MAXMaps, single code model summaries. I know we did some summaries on this code. That can get kind of messy, as you can see there. I think the maps works if there aren't a ton of summaries, although that's probably still doable, right? You could. There's not that many cases there. But in the final version of the project, there were a lot more cases, in which case if you took all of the summaries, it would kind of get overwhelming. But this is one of the ways you can present the data. And then the final tool is one I've never actually used. It's okay, I'm going to be ending in a few minutes, so thank you. And under mixed methods, there's side-by-side display of results. And if you have results for a project, qualitative results for a project in one document and quantitative results from a project in another, you could, where you've got summaries written, you could take, this is actually Stefan gave me this, you could take these two documents, add in themes, and see the results of the summaries that'll look like that. I think the tool is perhaps I've never used it, but it is one of the tools. You could also use that tool. I don't think it really matters if one is listed as qualitative and one is listed as quantitative. If documents include summarized codes, you could see the differences in the two summaries. It might be useful with a thematic. Themes, summaries. That, in a nutshell, about an hour and about 75 minutes. I know we said 2 hours, but really there isn't 2 hours worth of work here. Those are summary tables. What questions do you have for me? I hope this was helpful to you. I know most of you haven't been using this tool a lot. I really find it to be one of my favorite analysis components in MAXQDA. It does require work, but I'm finding that particularly if you're using MAXQDA with undergrads, that this is a tool that they can do and they can use. And when you look at what my student did with the exoneration project, that's actually pretty powerful. Any questions or thoughts? Any topics you'd like us to do further trainer webinars on? I'm glad you use it. Well, if not, I wish you a great evening and a day, evening, and I look forward to seeing you all in the future and hopefully at MQIC in Berlin. Let's hope we're able to have MQIC in Berlin. If Delta doesn't kill us all. Have a great time.